ocean of yoga, we have taken up a lofty goal today, Heyam Dukham Anagatam. So you can all come closer to your devices so that we can see the slides that I'll be sharing today. And let this serve as an inspiration for you to take the lifelong practice of yoga and the study of Yoga Sutras and Bhagavad Gita. You're able to see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So we'll begin with the talk, and this will be about 45 minutes to an hour. This will be followed by question answers and a practice session. So we'll begin. Shuklam Bharadaram Vishnum Shashivarnam Chaturbhujam Prasannavadanam Dhyayet Sarva Vignopashantaye Saraswati Namastubhyam Varade Kamarupini Vidyarambham Karishyami Siddhirabhavatu me sada Ishvaro Gururatmeti Murti Bheda Vibhagine Vyomavat Vyapta Dehaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vitpishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Gananan Tva Ganapati Gum Havamahe Priyanan Tva Priyapati Gum Havamahe Nidhinan Tva Nidhipati Gum Havamahe Vaso Mama. Om Swasti na Indra Vriddhashravah Swasti na Pukha Vishwavedah Swasti nastaraksharo arishthanemihi Swasti no Bruhaspatire dadhatu. Harihi Om. Yogena chittasya padena vacham malam sharirasya cha vaidyakena yopakarotam pravaram muninam patanjalim pranjaliranatosmi abahu purushakaram Shankha-chakrasi-dharinam Sahasra-shirsam shvetam Pranamami Patanjalim. Hari Om. So the topic today is Heyam Dukham Anagatam. Dukkham is unpleasantness. Kham means space, and kham is unpleasantness. Heyam is to avoid or to cut, and anagatam yet to come. So pain or misery yet to come can be avoided. That's the promise that Patanjali makes through his scripture of Yoga Sutra, the Shastra of Yoga. So just an overview before we start. Yoga is one of the Shat Darshanas, the 6 philosophies of Hindu Dharma. Darshana means vision. They give us the vision of life. Purva Mimamsa, Uttar Mimamsa, Vaisheshika, Nyaya, Sankhya, and Yoga. So yoga is one of the darshanas in itself. It has evolved over thousands of years. Sankhya philosophy existed for thousands of years before yoga came into practice. So a lot of concepts that we see in yoga are from Sankhya, and then the concept of Ishvara is added in yoga, which is not there in Sankhya. So some of us have already started looking at this chart through some of our previous classes, but this is the tattvas of the Sankhya philosophy. Purusha is the consciousness, Prakriti is the primordial material. From the Prakriti and the conjunction of the Purushas, when the two unite, this union brings in the whole of the evolution or all of the aspects that we see in the Prakriti. So Prakriti by itself is Jada. It has no life or consciousness of its own. But Purusha is conscious entity. And when these two come together, the first evolute that comes out is Mahat, or at the individual level, it's Buddhi. We need to know these concepts so that we understand today's talk better than all of the terminologies. Some of us, it is new, the Prakriti, Purusha. Even if you are well versed with the Sanskrit, the Sanskrit that Patanjali uses is quite different from what is in Bhagavad Gita. So it's good to be familiar with some of these terminologies. And keep your mind open. If you're new and this is your first time, this is a vast ocean. Just try and grab as much as you can. So Purusha and Prakriti come together, Mahat, Buddhi. From the Buddhi, the next evolute is the Ahamkar, or the ego. And ego after the next evolution is Manas. Okay, and then there is the 5 organs of actions and the 5 organs of cognition. So the Jnanendriyas and the Karmendriyas. The 5 Panchabhutas, the main elements, ether, air, fire, water, and earth, and also the 5 sense perceptions, that is sound, touch, form, flavor, and smell. So these are the 24 components of Sankhya philosophy, and plus 1 Purusha makes it 25. So this is the tattva-abhyasa that we need to do as a yogi or a yoga practitioner. So we said that the Sankhya philosophy is the theory behind yoga. The goal of the Sankhya philosophy is for us to go through the experiences of life, and through those experiences, realize who we really are. So bhoga and apavarga, these are the 2 words used. When we go in the outer world and we go through the experiences, that aspect of us is bhoga. And after going through those experiences, we realize that maybe I don't have a right perspective of life. And I need to know who I am, why am I here, and what is the purpose of my life. And most of us know that we go through a lot of suffering. And what can I do so that I can get over this suffering? So bhoga and apavarga, these are the goals of Sankhya philosophy. This is the first words from Sankhya philosophy. Dukkha-trayā-abhighātāt. So abhighātāt is to be suffering from pain. And there are 3 causes of pain. So if we were to ask what is the cause of pain, we would have a long list, right? We would say, my body hurts, or sometimes I experience anxiety, and maybe I'm disturbed by my relationships with my spouse or the kids or my in-laws, or at the job I am troubled with my colleagues. So many lists, right? Our list can go on and on and on. That's long. But our sages and rishis, they contemplated and they said that let's put them down into 3 categories. So that's why there is duḥkha-trayā. What are those 3 categories? Adi daibikam, adi bhautikam, and adhyatmik. So they said any misery, if we really look closely at, can be classified into these 3. Either it comes from the universe, like tsunami or volcano or hurricane, that I have no control over, seemingly, and I might suffer from that. Or adibhautikam, things around us. Maybe it's a COVID virus, maybe the bacteria or other living beings that we are troubled with. Then there is adhyatmik, the pain that comes from my body and mind. So if I say, okay, these are all my problems, why should I do yoga? There are so many other methods. Not everybody is doing yoga in life. Not everybody in the world practices yoga, but they seem to go through life fine. So why should I practice yoga? Then the Sankhya Karika, which is the first available literature on Sankhya, the Sankhya Sutras are lost, we don't have them, goes very systematically that there is certain fallacies in that method of getting rid of pain and suffering. The two main categories they divide the fallacies is into abhāvāt of ekantata. There is no guarantee that my pain will be removed. And we have all experienced that, right? So many times we feel sad or depressed or anxious and nothing seems to work. So there is no guarantee that these methods of remedy will work. And even if they work, there is Atyantatou abhavat. It means the remedy is short lasting. It's not permanent. And I need permanent solution for my pain and misery. So this is a very, very lofty goal that we have taken up, right? Yoga is a moksha shastra. It has very little to do with the asana practice. But that's the place most of us start our yoga journey. And it's a good place to start because controlling body is much easier than controlling mind. So having realized these two fallacies, we start our journey on yoga with a lot of shraddha that yes, this is the path which will take care of my pain and suffering with guarantee and permanently. So with the Sankhya philosophy, then we start the yoga abhyasa. So now we said that there are 6 darshanas. For the Vedanta darshana, Brahma Sutras are the books. From Brahma Sutras, the Bhagavad Gitas, and all of the allied texts, the Tattva Bodha, Atma Bodha, Bhaja Govindam. So many texts we study when we study Vedanta. When we study yoga, the book that we study, the complete book on yoga, which gives all of the aspects very comprehensively, is Patanjali's Yoga Sutra. In fact, in yoga, this is the book we need to study. So the Patanjali Yoga Sutras are divided into 4 chapters, 195 sutras. Samadhi Pada is the first chapter, Sadhana Pada is the second chapter, Vibhuti Pada, and Kaivalya. So the goal is Kaivalya or moksha, complete freedom from bondage, pain, and suffering. And we have already started looking at the first chapter, the Samadhi Pada. But today we'll change the gears and look at the first 16 verses from the second chapter. And I'll tell you why we'll change the gears. Because Patanjali, it's not very distinctly classified into these 3, but Krishnamacharya, this is how he used to teach. He's the grandfather of all the modern yoga that you see. He would say that the Patanjali Yoga Sutra divides itself into 3 categories of yogi, adhikaris. Right? We all have different, we are all at the different level of evolution. So if I am a yogi who is already having a ekagra mind or very one-pointed focus, then for me, Samadhi Yoga is the path that is given in yoga. That is the first chapter. Here, we are already assuming that we have the capacity of going into Samadhi. So prerequisite of the first chapter is your ability to go into Samadhi. So I have to be an Uttam Adhikari for that. It means I've done my homework in previous life. We have so many great rishis and saints, and also in the modern times, we have seen Swami Vivekananda, Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. So they don't need to practice asana pranayam, right? They go straight into Samadhi. So but they have done their homework in their previous life. For such kind of yogis, Samadhi Yoga is given. The first chapter of yoga is given. But we all know that we don't have that kind of mind. Our mind is distracted. Then Patanjali says, don't worry. If you're not able to go into Samadhi, I have a solution for you. I will give you second chapter, the Sadhana Pada, the instruments that will lead you to Samadhi. So then the second chapter starts, and that's the Samadhi, Ashtanga Yoga. Mainly all of the aspects of Ashtanga Yoga are dealt with in this chapter. 8 steps of yoga. Yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, samadhi. And this is for madhyama adhikari. So we are really not suffering, we don't have any pain, but we start saying, okay, let me start practicing yoga so that I can experience a lot of health and well-being. And that is why we come to yoga. Some of us come to yoga not because we are suffering, but we want to have good health. So then we are Ashtanga yogis. But there are some people who come to yoga when we experience pain, It can be body pain, it can be blood pressure, diabetes, asthma, back pain, anxiety, depression, so many reasons. And for those yogis, the beginner yogis, the adhama yogis, adhamadhikaris, Patanjali gives Kriya Yoga. So now let's not get confused between this Kriya Yoga and the Kriya Yoga that we hear from Paramahamsa Yogananda and that tradition, or Swami Vidyadeshananda. That Kriya Yoga is different. Here we'll see what Patanjali means by Kriya Yoga. So Kriya Yoga is actually a subset of Ashtanga Yoga. If we know the yam and the niyams, we know in the Ashtanga Yoga, the first limb is yam and the second limb is niyam. And of the niyam, these are the three subsets. So we'll really start by looking at the first verse of the second chapter, that is the sadhan pada. So when we go to the doctor, say if we have pain or we have fever, before even the doctor goes to the root of the cause of the pain and the fever, he gives us certain medicines so that our symptoms come down, so that we instantly feel some relief. So that is the approach also Patanjali takes. He says, okay, you're suffering. Let me give you few practices to start with so that you're not overwhelmed with it. So this is how he starts the second chapter, by defining Kriya Yoga. Tapas Svadhyaya Ishvara Pranidhanani Kriya Yoga. So what is Kriya? Kriya, we all know in Sanskrit, means to do something. It's an action, karma. But not any action, not the action, not our actions that we do in the Vyavharik world. But this is the Adhyatmic world. So the actions that I will do so that I take this journey inwards, the spiritual journey of yoga. So then there are some certain tenets on what this Kriya Yoga means, the definition of Kriya Yoga. And Patanjali gives it very beautifully in 3 words, 3 practices that we need to do as a beginner on the path of yoga. Tapaha, Swadhyaya, Ishvara Pranidhana. So we'll see each of these a little closely. Of course, each of these in itself is a 1 to 2 hours topic. I'm trying to put everything here and just take a glimpse of everything. So tapaha literally means heat, to heat up something, right? To go through inconveniences and do the right thing. It's a discipline. No, we don't all like it. It's not very pleasant in the beginning, but that's where we start, tapaha. Krishnamacharya used to define it very beautifully. He just gave even smaller aspect of tapa to start with. He said, mitta ahar and mitta bhashanam is tapa. Just work with first organ, the tongue. See if you can control your speech and see if you can control your appetite or your food habits. That's the place you start. So tapaha is mitta ahar or mitta bhashanam in a very simple language. But tapa is much more than that. It's like, if you have gold and you want to separate the impurities from the gold, it has to be really heated up at a very high temperature so that the gold shines through. And that is the same approach we are taking in yoga. There is light within us, but we are not able to experience that light. It is dimmed right now because it is covered with so many impurities. And through our austerities or the practices of yoga, tapaha is where we start. So now these yoga sutras are very, very concise. If you see that each of the sutras, on an average, they have 5 to 6 words that are packed together and one sutra is formed. Really, if we need to understand the Patanjali Yoga Sutra, parallelly, we also need to study Bhagavad Gita. Because Krishna is very generous. And he's taking 700 verses for us to understand what Patanjali is trying to give us in 196 aphorisms or formulas, right? So these are really formulas. E is equal to mc squared. I need to know what is E, I need to know what is M, I need to know what is C. So tapaha, then Bhagwan in chapter 17 of Bhagavad Gita really elaborates what tapaha is. He says tapaha can be classified as austerities of body, certain practices we need to do so that our body is disciplined, vak tapas, so that our speech is disciplined, and manasa tapas, so that our mind is also disciplined, our thoughts are disciplined. So that is very beautifully elaborated by Bhagwan in 17th chapter. In fact, I can read some of those, the three verses that Bhagwan is giving. Deva dvija guru prajna pujanam sauchanam arjavam brahmacharyam ahimsacha shariram tapa uchyate. So Bhagwan defines what is the austerity of body. He says, when I serve the Brahmanas, the Dvijas, the twice born, the people who have learned Vedas, when I serve my Guru, when I serve my elderlies, when I serve the gods through my body, that form is called as the austerity of body. Then he goes on to define what is the austerity of speech or vak tapas. Anudvegakaram vakyam satyam priyahitam chayat swadhyaya-abhyasam chaiva vangmayam tapa uchyate. Then Bhagwan says, what kind of speech should you have? The speech should be such that it is true, it is pleasant, and it is beneficial to person who is hearing it. And also swadhyaya and abhyasam, chanting of the Vedas, chanting of so many things that we can take up. That's that kind of speech we should take up, and that is the vak tapas. Even Manusmriti gives what are the qualification of vak tapas. It says that speak what is true, speak what is pleasant, and do not speak that is pleasant but it is not true. Right? So this is given in all of our scriptures. The concept of tapa appears pretty much in all of our shastras. And then mana tapas, mana prasada saumyatvam, maunam atma vinigraha, bhava samshuddhir ityetat, tapo manasam uchyate. So the serenity of thought, gentleness, maunam, the quietness of the quietude of the mind, the control of our thoughts, all these are considered as the austerities or tapa to control our mind. But if we keep doing austerities and keep doing these, we might overdo it. So that's why then Patanjali brings this aspect of Swadhyaya and Ishvara Pranidhana. In fact, there is a story, there is a disciple that goes to the Guru and he says, can you please give me practices that I can go on the path of Samadhi? So Guru says, here, you take these practices, you practice them 1 hour every day, and it will take you 12 years to get there. So he's a very sincere practitioner and very hardworking. So he says, if he told me to practice for 1 hour, maybe it will take me 12 hours. But what if I practice for 4 hours every day? Then maybe I can get there in 3 years. Then he goes to his Guru and he says, what if I do this for 4 hours every day? Well, Guru says, then it might take you 12 years. He has some calculation of his own, right? But basically what the teacher wanted to tell is you can't overdo it, because there has to be samatvam, balance in everything we do, right? So that has to be then coupled with swadhyaya. I do my tapas, I do my austerity, but I also understand my own self as I do that. Okay, I did these practices. Did that help me? Why am I doing these practices? So studying of our shastras has to be done parallelly. That is the meaning of swa-adhyaya, to study my true self, to know who I am, through the experiences of my sages that have put down in my swadhyaya, in the shastras. And swadhyaya sometimes also means japa, to do a repetition of, so that you can develop the control of our mind. So that is the meaning of swadhyaya. Now I can be doing tapa and I can be doing swadhyaya, but I have to have certain higher purpose, or there has to be an intention to my practice. Otherwise it becomes a mundane practice. It will not lead you to yoga. You can be the best asana practitioner, the most advanced asana practitioner, but you will never experience yoga. Because yoga is much, much more. You have to know the nuances of it. All of these aspects are very, very important. So if we don't bring balance in all of this, we will not experience yoga. So if we do swadhyaya, that's like a left hemisphere. You see so many people, they're scholarly, they will chant the 700 verses of Bhagavad Gita, they will chant so many things, but they will yet not experience yoga, because that is intellectual understanding. Until understanding intellectual is not really going to help us enough to get to the samadhi. You have to go beyond the intellect. You have to transcend the intellect. And that's why then Bhagwan gives us this aspect of Ishvara Pranidhana. You have to do your tapa, you have to do your swadhyaya, but you have to also do it with a higher goal. That is devotion. And that is the very, very important aspect of um, the Hatha Yoga and the Raja Yoga. In fact, Krishnamacharya used to say that this is the practice of Bhakti Yoga. Really, Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, the Vedic Yoga, the Astika Vedic Yoga is really a Bhakti Yoga practice. So this Ishvara Pranidhana is very, very important. In fact, Ishvara Pranidhana is so important that for all these three levels of yogi, we said, in Samadhi Pada, Bhagwan gives Ishvara Pranidhana, Patanjali gives Ishvara Pranidhana. In Ashtanga Yoga also Ishvara Pranidhana comes. And in Kriya Yoga also Ishvara Pranidhana comes. That's how important that Ishvara Pranidhana is. So that is the importance, and this is the definition of Kriya Yoga. And tapa is actually such an auspicious word. In fact, Krishnamacharya used to say that our asana practice should be like a Shiva puja. It is an auspicious thing to do. When we go to the asana mat, it has to be done with the bhava of Ishvara Pranidhanam. It's a Shiva puja. And we also can see that tapa is the beginning of the first verse of the Ramayana also. Tapa swadhyaya niratam. That's how the Ramayana also starts. So such an auspicious thing to do is tapa. Now, we don't like to do anything unless we are told what will I get out of it, right? So after defining what is Kriya Yoga, right away Patanjali says, Samadhi bhavanarthascha kleshatanu karnarthascha. So what will I get if I practice tapa swadhyaya ishvara pranidhanam? Then Patanjali says, this will prepare you as a yogi on the path of yoga. It will not really lead to samadhi, but it will take you on the path of samadhi after you do the Kriya Yoga practices. And as you stay on that for years to come, slowly these miseries will come down. The pain and the suffering that you are going through will come down. So it's like, you take a snowmobile to get somewhere. As you climb and take that snowmobile to get somewhere, along the path, the snow also gets cleared. So you want to go to this highest goal of samadhi. Along the path, all of your miseries will be also reduced. That's what Patanjali is saying. We will get two things after practicing Kriya Yoga. So we can see the third verse then. But before we go to that, let's go back to this Samadhi bhavanarthascha kleshatanu karnarthascha. So like we said, that there are three levels of yogis, right? The first is the Samadhi yogi. So our goal is Kaivalya, moksha. Samadhi yogi, he takes the horse of Samadhi. He has the capacity to absorb himself in the object of contemplation. So Samadhi is nothing but perfect meditation. Whatever object of meditation you take, you are able to completely absorb in it and completely forget even yourself. That is Samadhi. If you have that capacity of Samadhi, you will be able to get to the goal of moksha. But that's a lofty goal. And a lot of us, we still don't even know how to get to Samadhi. It's like that horse of Samadhi we need to get to the moksha, but I need to know how to mount that horse. If I don't know how to mount the horse, the horse is going to throw me off. So this Kriya Yoga and Ashtanga Yoga is really a practice to know how to mount that horse of Samadhi. So having said that, we'll see now so we said that we need to reduce these miseries. So pain and suffering, we said, are from the Adi-Daivik, Adi-Baudik and Adhyatmik. Now we get to the root of it. What are these kleshas, or what are these pain that we are talking about? Then he defines as avidya, asmita, raga, dvesha, kleshaha. The pain and suffering, he says, are from 5 things. Really gets to the root of it. He says, avidya. Vidya is to know something. When you not knowing again in the outer world, I might be expert in all other subject matter. I might know why COVID happens. I know heart. I know why blood pressure happens. So much knowledge you can get in outer world. But that knowledge is of no use on Adhyatmic path. This knowledge is Atma Vidya, right? So he says, avidya. Right now, your pain and suffering is because of you don't know who you are. You do not know your true self. Lack of wisdom on adhyatmic path, avidya. Now, because you don't know who you really are, because you don't know that there is a Purusha within you, that is your true nature. You don't know your true identity. So, what you're doing now, you're taking different identities that people around you are doing. You're just following the herd. You have an herd instinct. Because you don't know who you are thinking that you are this body, you are this mind, you are this intellect. I'm Dr. Nayak, I'm a yoga teacher, I'm a Seva International chapter coordinator, I'm a mother of so and so, I'm Ashtanga yogi. So many false identities or ephemeral identities that I have taken up. Because I don't know that I am that Brahman, I'm that Purusha, not knowing that I've taken up these temporary identities. That is asmita, loosely translated as ego in English. But the ego word again has two Sanskrit words, ahamkara and asmita. Aham karta iti manyate iti ahamkara. But that's not the ego here Patanjali is talking about. Patanjali is saying that you have taken up wrong identities right now and you're running with these identities. And what are these? Because of these identities you have taken up, because of these things that you think you are, because I'm this house, I'm so many identities. I'm proud of my car, I'm proud of my degrees. Now you start developing attachment to these identities that I have taken up. So that is raga, ranjate iti raga. It's like a glue. Because now I have taken up these identities, I get completely glued to it. I become obsessive about them. I get raga, intense attachment, intense desire to keep these identities. And also, we'll look at the raga word again later on because Patanjali goes on to define each of these individually. And along the path, I start experiencing so many things and I don't like certain things I experience and I develop aversion towards it. Right? Sometimes we say, oh, I did my asana practice, it brings me pain. Some of us, we do try one or two asana classes and we give up because it causes pain. Well, sometimes I say the pain on the asana practice is for 10-15 years. It doesn't go anywhere. That's why it's called the my sore practice, right? It's a sore practice. But dvesha, we developed aversion. We don't want to do it because it causes pain. And after living this life of raga and dvesha for years and years and decades and years and even our previous janmas, we develop intense clinging to it, abhinivesha, fear of death. We think that this body and mind is me, this little I that I have created myself from is me, and I cling to it. My clinging becomes so strong that I develop fear of death. I want to cling on, hold on to the life. So these are the root cause of our miseries. That's what Patanjali says. And then he goes on to define what is avidya. Avidya uttaresham prasupta tanu vichinna udaranam. So he says, your ignorance is the root cause of everything else. So really, it's not these five separate kleshas. If we get rid of this avidya, which is the root cause of all of that is following, then you will be in the path of yoga. And then he goes on to say that this avidya can be of four forms. It can be dormant, that is prasupta. Supta is to sleep. These avidya is sleeping right now. Or it can be tanu, thin, like a blade of grass. It is very, very thin, easy to take out before it becomes a big tree. Vichinna, it is interrupted. Sometimes I have the avidya, sometimes it is there and it goes away. Sometimes it takes turn, or sometimes the avidyas also take turn, right? Sometimes we have asmita, sometimes I have raga, sometimes I have dvesha, sometimes I have abhinivesha. So that is vichinna. It takes turn. Or udarana, they are rampant, they are generous. Udaran, right? Udar, that is a word that we use in other languages also. Patanjali is using a positive word here, but he's saying these avidya is also generous in some of us. So when it is thin or subtle, it is good in the beginning. A subtle avidya is good. It's kind of being cautious, right? So let's just take our asana practice. I'm cautious. I don't go and do things that I'm not supposed to do. I don't just suddenly take up one advanced asana and start taking. So I'm cautious. Now, if this avidya, that from cautious, if we go a little more, it creates fear. If the fear becomes even more, it becomes anxiety. And if anxiety is even more, then it becomes paranoid. So there's a whole spectrum. If it is little bit is fear, it's good. But if it goes to the other extreme, it's not very good. This udaranam is not very good. So avidya kshetram uttaresham. So that is the cause of all of others, and that can be of 4 levels. Then he defines what avidya is. He says, anitya, ashuchi, dukkha, anatma. Nitya, shuchi, sukha, atma is wrong conception of what is anitya, which is ephemeral, which is not permanent, thinking that to be nitya or permanent, like this body. We all know that it's not going to be everlasting, but yet we think we are never going to. When it comes close to it, we don't want to accept it, right? So thinking what is anitya to be nitya, thinking what is asuchi, impure, to be pure, thinking what is the cause of suffering to be bringing us joy, and then anatma, to consider non-self, the body mind, to be self, is defined as avidya. So superimposing these 4 misconceptions is avidya. Then he defines asmita, very beautifully defined. Asmita, drik darshana shaktyoho ekatmata iva asmita, as if eva. Asmita is where this drik shakti and darshana shakti is as if it is one. We looked at in the beginning also, when Purusha and Prakriti two together, right? Our problem is we are not able to separate the Purusha and Prakriti. We are not understanding that true self is Purusha and this body, mind, intellect is Prakriti. When this Purusha is defined as Drik Shakti, Purusha is a seer, it's consciousness, it's ever lit, it doesn't get affected by anything. Your pure self, your true self, doesn't get affected whether you have $1 million or don't have $1 million. It's as it is. It doesn't get affected when you were a little kid or you became an adult or old person. So this Drik Shakti, that is what Patanjali calls it. He uses different terms in different places for that same Purusha. But the Purusha here he calls it as Drik Shakti. And Darshana Shakti is the mind stuff, the body, mind, intellect, or the chitta vrittis. That is called as Darshana Shakti. When we confuse this Drig and Darshana Shakti to be one, that definition is asmita, or the ego. Then he defines what is raga. Sukha anushayi ragaha. Anushayi is to follow. If I experience some pleasantness, I want to repeat that experience over and over again, right? Like if I like gulab jamun, I experience joy and pleasure. And then my mind keeps following it. It wants to do it over and over and over again. It remembers that experience and sort of becomes attached to it. And that kind of glue nature of your mind is defined as raga. And this is also a cause of lot of our pain and misery. Similarly, dukkha-anushayi dvesha. I experience not so, like we already talked about the asana practice, certain things don't bring me joy. Like say if I eat salad for the first time, it's not that pleasant. I have not trained my body to do so. It brings pain, suffering, right? And then sort of sometimes I develop aversion to it. I don't want to repeat it again. And we'll give so many reasons why we don't want to do it. Our mind is beautiful. It loves to create so many stories and it can justify whatever it wants to justify. So dukkha-anushayi dvesha. Then swarasavahi vidusho api tata arudha abhinivesha. So here he goes on to define what is abhinivesha. He's saying vidushaha api. Vidushaha are scholarly people. In them also this abhinivesha is rampant. Swarasavahi just keeps flowing. It has so much momentum of its own. So sometimes we can really intellectually take up a lot of study of the scriptures. This is actually something we really need to think about. Sometimes we want to listen to so many YouTube videos, we want to read so many scriptures, we want to get information from so many places. But that's not really what yoga is, or that's not really what swadhyaya is. Even if we take one verse, we need to sit and do manana and nidhityasana. We need to contemplate on it. Otherwise, we will get information overload and indigestion will happen on spiritual path also. So these vidushahapi, the scholarly people who have PhDs in yoga, so many shastras, they also have this abhinivesha, clinging for life. Because knowing something intellectually is very different from practicing it. Putting into practice is completely different. That's why also that atha yoga anushasanam. Sometimes when Patanjali says atha, he means that you have understood, you have read the Bhagavad Gita, you have studied the Upanishads, you have done the Brahma Sutras, and even then you have not experienced yoga. Why? Because you have not practiced what you have learned. Practicing it is a completely different level. So in Vidusha api, the scholarly people also, this abhinivesha is rampant. So we have done the practices of Kriya Yoga. We have understood what Kriya Yoga is. Then what will happen if I start practicing this tapa swadhyaya ishvara pranidhana? Te prati prasava heya sukshma. When I start practicing Kriya Yoga, these kleshas, the avidya, raga, dvesha, abhinivesha, they will become sukshma. They will become subtle. They will not be completely taken, uprooted from their root, but prati prasava. They will start regressing. They will start rolling back. So, te prati prasava sukshma. With the practices of Kriya Yoga, our kleshas will become sukshma. Once they become sukshma, what can I do? Dhyana heyas tat-vrittayah. After they become subtle, then I take up the practices of meditation or dhyana. So first I have to practice yam, niyam, asana, pranayam, pratyahar. These are the bahya component of yoga. After doing this for years and years, sometimes many lives, my kleshas become smaller. And then I take up the meditative practices. A lot of times people come to yoga and they say, well, I don't want to do asana, pranayam. I don't want to do abhyasa. I don't want to study the shastras. I want to meditate. Well, you're not going to be able to meditate because you have not prepared. You have not prepared your body with the discipline that requires. You have not prepared your mind to be able to get absorbed in the object of contemplation. So the dhyana is not going to come. Patanjali says you will have to do these Kriya Yoga and Ashtanga Yoga. Then only you can take up Dharana, Dhyana and Samadhi, the Antaranga practices of yoga. So Dhyana, Heyas, Tat Vrittayah. All your vrittis, the mind stuff, will get eliminated with the practices of meditation, the Dhyana Yoga. This Dhyana Yoga is actually the Kriya Yoga of Paramahamsa Yogananda and the lineage that comes from that. So that is defined as Kriya Yoga in there, the Dharana, Dhyana and Samadhi. So having done this, the Kriya Yoga, your vrittis will become sukshma, and then you can do dhyana and uproot them from the root and completely eliminate them. Sometimes it is said that Patanjali studied Bhagavad Gita, because if you go through the verses of Bhagavad Gita, there is so much parallel between the two. So here again, to sum up this Kriya Yoga practices, here is a beautiful verse from Bhagavad Gita, because Arjuna is also confused. He says, if you're telling me that knowledge is superior, if dhyana is superior, why are you telling me to do karma yoga? Then Krishna says, Aru rukshor muner yogam karma karanam uchyate yoga rudhasya tasyaiva shama karanam uchyate. He's saying, if you're a beginner, then for you, karma yoga is the path. Kriya yoga is the path. You will have to do nishkama karma. You will have to serve people. You will have to serve everybody without any expectation. Follow the tenets of karma yoga for years and years, maybe lives and lives. You are at the beginning, this cannot be bypassed. So if you are a beginner, Aru Rukshor is the path. Karma yoga is the path. But if you have practiced karma yoga in your previous lives, you are a aru rudha. You are established in the path of yoga. For you, the dhyana yoga is the path, right? So for each of us, there is a path given. Aru rukshor muner yogam karma karanam uchyate yoga rudhasya tasyaiva shama karanam uchyate. So that is where that kriya yoga part sort of concludes in the first 11 verses. Then Patanjali takes us to a very, very important concept next 3 sutras, starting from the 11th sutra or the 12th sutra of the second chapter. He goes on to then define what the karma is. If we really don't understand the karma theory very well, then the understanding of this Patanjali Yoga Sutra will not come. So this is very, very important 3 sutras from the second chapter. Klesha Mula Karmakshayo Dṛṣṭe Anudrishta Janma Vedaniya. Kleshas are the roots of unripe karmas. They are the repositories of the karmas, whose consequences you will see in this janma or in some other janmas. Right? Sometimes we think, but I've been so good, why am I going through all this suffering? Here the karma concept comes. Patanjali says that sometimes your karmas don't fructify in this janma, right? We all know the karma theory, but it is really, really important to understand and put it in practice. So here Patanjali says, if your actions are based in kleshas, if they come from the root of avidya, smita, raga, dvesha, it will create karmashaya. Very, very important word. It will create a tank of karmas. It will create a storehouse of karma. That is called the karmashaya. We have all come with the tank of karma. Again, we'll go into this understanding a little more. So if our actions are rooted in kleshas, if they come from avidya and asmita, it is going to create karmashaya. It's a root cause of our karmashaya. That is the storehouse of our karma. And they can fructify in this janma or some other janmas, not necessarily. Sometimes we see the consequences right away, right? If I eat wrong food or if I don't sleep well the previous day, right away next day it reflects in my asana practice. Sometimes they fructify very quickly. Sometimes you don't see them fructify, but they will for sure fructify. They are not going to go unseen by Chitragupta. He's keeping account of everything. He's Gupta. But nothing goes unseen. And but there are certain different qualities of action. If they're not rooted in kleshas, if they are dhyana jamanam, then they will not bring karmashaya. So if our actions are not rooted in kleshas, but if they come from a deeper understanding of who I am, if they come from the place of dhyana, if they come from the place of meditation, and they don't come out of ignorance, then they're not going to create karmashaya. There is the 6th verse from the, or the 6th sutra from the 4th chapter of Patanjali Yoga Sutra. Tatra dhyana jam anashayam. This ashayam is the storehouse. Anashayam, if your actions are rooted in dhyana from meditation, they will not create this karmashaya. That is what Patanjali is saying. Then here is also the good place to look at sati mule tat vipako jatya ayur bhogaha. So then Patanjali goes on to say that this karma shaya that you have created, the storehouse that you have created, vipaka or fructifies into 3 things. It is already predetermined what kind of a birth will you take place, where will you be born, what kind of a body will you take up, will you be a male or a female, will you be in certain so many aspects. The birth, the jati is determined already. Also the lifespan is predetermined. How much would be your lifespan in this janma, and what kind of experiences will you go through is determined by this sati mule, the karmashaya that we have created. Now, we all have probably heard of this, but it's good to look at it again. There is sanchita karma, there is prarabdha karma, and there is agami karma. Now, we might think, oh, if it's already predetermined, that is not very promising, right? If I can't do anything about it, what is the use? But that's not what really your Patanjali means. He says that, like that, let's take an example here. Say I love ice cream. Then I'll go to the grocery store and buy a lot of ice cream. I'll bring a lot of cans of ice cream and store them in the fridge. Then I start eating that ice cream every day. Then somebody says, you know what? I think this you should go and study yoga sutras. Maybe you should study yoga. And then I end up going and attending some yoga workshop, and I learn yoga sutras, and I realize, that maybe ice cream eating is not so good. Then maybe I go home and I throw all the ice cream from the fridge. So that ice cream that I had stored in the fridge is like sanchita karma. I can throw it. Once I know who I am, once I've experienced through the practices of yoga, then I can get rid of it. But the ice cream that I've already eaten, I have to bear the consequences of it. That is like the prarabdha karma. There is their storehouse. I have taken a backpack full of those karma kshaya, and I have taken this birth. This is the prarabdha karma. That I have to exhaust. It means even if I gain the knowledge of yoga, whatever that backpack I have come with, I will have to exhaust it. And then what do I do with agami? What are the new ways of methods? I should not create new more karmas, right? Otherwise, this cycle of birth and death, which I'm trying to get out of, that's my ultimate Heyam Dukham Anagatam. I will never be able to do it. So that takes us to the next verse. Te lhada paritapa phalaha punya apunya hetutvat. So Patanjali says that experiences can be either happy or unhappy depending on what kind of karmas we do. We all know this, right? As we sow, so we reap. Or it's like the third law of Newton. Every action has equal and opposite reaction. So if I do good karmas, punya will come to me. If I do bad karmas, papa will come to me. Sometimes we even say, I don't want to do so many punya karmas so that I experience heaven, higher realms, where the sukha becomes more and more. It in fact multiplies. They say, right, every higher level, the sukha multiplies 100 times. So if at the human level it is one, that in Swarga Loka, we will experience 100 times more sukha. So I will say, let me then keep doing punya or good karmas. So I accumulate good karmas and then experience joy and happiness. But for yogi, he doesn't look at it like this. Yogi looks at it like it still is a bondage. Because when that punya exhausts, I will again come back to this mrityuloka or bhuloka, and I will have to again go through the cycle of birth and death and go through all of that again. So it's like, if I'm bound by a gold chain, I'm still bound. It doesn't matter if I'm bound by the gold chain or if I'm bound by an iron chain. I'm still bound. I'm still not experiencing moksha. So then yogi says that, no, there is a different way of doing this. And that's why he takes up the path of yoga, and then he looks at things differently. So this verse is very, very deep. In fact, very beautiful verse. This is the second last verse. Then we'll finish with a couple more verses. I know this is a lot for you, but be patient. Parinama, tapa, samskara, dukkhair, guna, vritti, virodhascha, dukkhameva sarva vivekinaha. So viveki word, viveki is the yogi. When we are on the path of yoga, sometimes Krishnamacharya used to say that yama, niyama, asana, pranayam, pratyahar, 5 levels. If we are there, then we are yoga abhyasi. If we are practicing the antarayanga yoga, the dharana, dhyana, samadhi, then we are yogis. Right? So this Vivekina is a yogi. He says, look, the dukkha is 3 types. He has really analyzed the life very closely. He said there is parinama dukkha, there is tapa dukkha, and there is samskara dukkha. What is parinama dukkha? When I'm going through certain experiences, let's say I'm going through a very pleasant experience. I have a marriage that I have organized. All the family members are there. I'm having a lot of fun. I'm so happy. But somewhere inside, I feel, oh, this is all going to finish and I'm going to miss it. then you have that always something in the background, that brooding pain, that inside that voice, which is always experiencing some kind of fear and anxiety. That background noise is always there. We don't want to get rid of our pleasant experiences. And that kind of pain is called parinama dukkha. Then I'm waiting for that wedding to happen. Now I can't wait for that party to come, or I can't wait for this experience. And even then you're experiencing anguish or dukkha. That is tapa dukkha, waiting for certain experiences to come. Then samskara dukkha. When that experience is over, it has left some residue. You say, oh, that thing is over. How much fun I had, such good memories I had. I wish that happened again. Oh, I had such good memories of my childhood. How I wish I could relive all of this. So yogi says that looks like while I'm waiting, while I'm going through, or when the experience is over, all of it is dukkha. Then why do I go through this cycle again and again? That is one aspect in this sutra. And then another aspect that Patanjali brings is vritti virodhasya. Vritti, or the gunas. This guna vritti virodha. The gunas we talked about, the sattva, tamas and rajas, they keep taking turns. At one point when I do my asana practice or the meditation, I feel very clear. I feel pure. I feel I have clarity. That's the sattva. And after the practice is over and then I jump out in the outside world, so many things come to me. And then the mind gets agitated. The guna then gets evoluted. It gets, comes in, it mutates into rajas. And then I do so many activities in the outside world and then get exhausted, right? And then tamas comes. So it looks like these gunas also keep changing. So why do I want to go through all of this cycle? So we might think that this is such a pessimistic way of looking at it, but that's not what really it is. Patanjali is saying, look, you don't have to look for joy, happiness in outside world. Joy and happiness, Satchit Ananda, is your nature. You don't have to do anything in order to achieve it. It is already there within you. All you need to do through these yoga practices is to remove your ignorance and know your true self. And that is the promise that Patanjali gives. And then he says, Heyam Dukham Anagatam. This is also the motto of Krishnamacharya Yoga Mandiram that is there in Chennai. Heyam Dukham Anagatam. The pain and misery yet to come can be avoided if we really take care of it from the root, by following all these practices that Patanjali has given us. And then he says, dṛṣṭe, dṛṣya, samyogo, heyam hetu. The bond that we have created between Purusha and Prakriti, what we are not able to separate, destroy that bond and then realize your true nature. That is when you will have complete and permanent solution to your pain and misery. We'll conclude with this verse from Bhagavad Gita, which also summarizes what we studied today. The 6th chapter is the Dhyana Yoga, the Abhyasa Yoga. This is the yoga of Atma Sanyama. Here also, Bhagwan gives all of the practices to to Arjuna. He's given all the practices. And Arjuna is like us. He's saying, oh Bhagwan, you're giving me all these practices. You're telling me to do tapas, svadhyaya, ishvara pranidhana and all that. What if I don't reach my goal of moksha in this janma? Then I have missed out on all the fun that other people are having in the material world. And I have also not reached my goal of yoga or moksha. What happens to me then? He says, Arjuna says, I will not be successful in material world, or I will not be successful in adhyatmic world either. Beautifully, Bhagwan Krishna, he is so patient with Arjun. He is taking 18 chapters to make him understand what Patanjali is giving in these sutras. He's saying, Tata, my dear friend Arjuna, don't get discouraged. He's saying, Partha naiveham namutra vinashastasya vidyate nahi kalyanakrit kaschit durgatim tata gacchati. He's saying that not in this world and not in any other world. Every effort that you do in this path will not get wasted, Arjuna. Everything will add on. If things are not conducive in this janma, in next janma you will be born in the family which has abundance of material wealth. You will be born in the family of yogis, and your path will become easier and easier if you stick on this path. So nothing on this path will get wasted. That's the promise. With lot of atmiyata, here he is saying, oh, the son of Pritha, Partha, do this with lot of shraddha, and I promise you that the goal of yoga will be reached. So that's the promise that we will conclude this talk with. And then in future, this was our first abhyas on Yoga Sutras. Then we can look into what are the obstacles along this path and what are the solutions. Patanjali gives us all of that. But I would like to stop here and